couple of your themes, the personal credit theme, the metal space. But now let's talk a little bit in detail about the theme of, the enablers of electrification. And we've spoken about some of those names, Havels, Voltas. We've invited the management of Bajaj Electricals, Mr. Shekhar Bajaj as well. So before that, tell us what the growth in this space could be, because some of the segments, like the consumer product segment of Bajaj Electricals, for example, has seen very subdued demand over the last couple of quarters.
Right. So, see, this is a theme we've been highlighting for a while, that, even in 2011, a third of Indian households had no wires going into their houses. So, there was a very low electrification. In states like Bihar, only 16% of the houses had wires going into their houses. And on top of that, there was a poor quality of electricity available. So even if you had, in many other states, wires going into their houses, the quality of electricity availability was very bad. But what is now starting to happen is, I think, with power availability improving and it becoming electorally important for state governments to deliver better quality power to more people, electrification has improved dramatically in states like West Bengal, Bihar, UP. The percentage of households connected has gone up substantially. And as I mentioned, that the nighttime pictures taken by satellites of India very, very clearly show that the power availability has improved as well. Now, what this means is that even if there were households in many areas who could afford to buy, say, a mixer grinder or an air conditioner, but they could not or would not because there was no electricity, can now start buying that. So the way the penetration stories in India work is that you're forced to cut prices or keep real price or nominal prices the same, and real prices keep falling, and that is when more households are able to afford. But in the case of enablers like electrification, for people selling consumer appliances, things can improve because of the environment changing. Now, I think the last several quarters, and see, the companies can see very different results from the same sector. There are lots of dynamics within the sector as well. But there have been disruptions because of demonetization. I think there was supply chain related disruption, and I think GST could be coming up as well. So you will see, I think, disrupted numbers. But if you're looking out to 3 years, I think this appliances and brown and white goods would actually be growing faster than nominal GDP.
Okay. Well, then let's toss that issue to Mr. Shekhar Bajaj, the Chairman Manager of Bajaj Electricals. Good morning, Mr. Bajaj. Do you actually notice any improved demand for electrical appliances in the states that are recently seeing a spate of electrification, like, say, Bihar, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh?
Let me start by saying that we have done a total of 25,000 villages in the last 2-3 years. We have done electrification, so we know that those markets where the villages have been electrified, the demand for consumer products has really gone up. Our numbers, which are shown for the last few quarters showing negative growth in consumer products, is not because our secondary sale is gone negative. It is because we are doing a distribution model which is different from the usual model which everybody does, and because of that we are stopping a lot of wholesaling and we are increasing our distribution. And what the earlier gentleman mentioned is very, very correct, that the future is going to lie in the smaller places where electrification is taking place, because the money is there but there was no electricity. Now that the electricity availability is there, you will find that they will be demanding all our consumer products, and therefore in our distribution strategy that we have made out for the coming years, we will find that our major growth is going to come out of the rural markets and what we call as rurban, that is rural, urban, semi-rural market. That is where the future is all about, and that's where the growth will come. And the penetration levels is also very, very low, and therefore from that angle also, I think instead of moving out, a lot of people say, why don't you get into other businesses like white goods and all? We said there's enough scope in our own business, and therefore we are looking at a 10% plus growth in the current year and much higher in the coming years.
Mr. Bajaj, if I may squeeze in a question here. One of the challenges of getting into under-penetrated areas is that you have to go in and do a lot of groundwork. So you have to sort of make your brand become more visible. You have to find reliable counterparties, and in that, effectively, it's it's as good or as bad as building a business afresh. And there is a lot of local competition. There's a lot of unbranded stuff. So two questions here. In areas where electrification is now happening, as you said, by definition are very backward and remote. So how do you deal with that, and how fast can those problems of distribution be addressed and branding be addressed? And secondly, with GST, because one of the expectations is that the informal sector, because there is a very high level of informal, I'd say unorganized manufacturing in the consumer appliances sector. So how do you think GST will affect them?
Okay. Firstly, the first point which you mentioned, that actually in the rural market, a whole new model which we are talking about, a redistribution model, we've already, like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu and Bihar, we've completely covered under our distribution, including the last village, and therefore we've already appointed distributors. So we are going to give to distributors, who in turn are going to go to each and every shop in that particular village, so that the availability becomes good for them, because they are local distributors. They know how to collect the money also. For us from Bombay or Delhi would find it very difficult, and therefore we think the growth, that's why I mentioned earlier that the growth is going to come out of the rural markets, where the distribution and availability is going to be substantially better. As far as GST is concerned, because it's a something where if somebody goes and tries to, the informal sector tries to avoid the tax at the first stage, in the next stage he will not get the set-off.
Fair point.
And therefore, to that extent, he starts losing out.
Okay. Well, Mr. Bajaj, we have a lot more questions for you actually on GST itself, but we have taken a lot of time from Neelkant and we have to thank him. Neelkant, well, before I let you go, there is another theme that you told us during your investor conference this year, and that was IT. You said that 2016, your discovered sector was metals, and then, it's ran and still running. If I remember right, you said in Jan 2017, IT could be the undiscovered dark horse. You still stick with it?
Yeah, I think it is. It's not been a very good call so far. I think that many of the fears and the reason, and I still hold on to my view. I think many of the fears that are affecting investor sentiment in the sector are quite a bit temporary, and people are not buying because the sector is not doing well. And one positive sign, and the recovery in US and Europe, or rather the stabilization of recovery in US and Europe, could actually mean that there should be a cyclical effect on their order books as well. And whenever they correct, I think there could be a sharp re-rating in terms of price to earnings multiple. So if we are selective in some of the names that we own, I still think that they can provide good returns in the rest of the year.
All right, Neelkant. Thank you very much indeed for joining us and staying on with us for practically an hour and discussing various themes, metals, consumer financing companies, basically personal finance itself, and electrification theme. So that's a lot of companies to choose from.
And there was lots to learn today from
Yes.
Neelkant and from all the guests that we had. Thanks, Neelkant, for joining us. Well.